Hi guys, this is Jack, and today we are going to be talking about 28 Years Later, which is the new film by Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. This is a sequel to the last two films, 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. Both of those films came out 2 decades ago, and now we're fast forwarding to the current generation of zombies and infected people as Danny Boyle directs this film with such tenacity and gonzo-ness that I kind of want to dissect a little bit deeper into what this film is about. So let's get into 28 Years Later. So with 28 Years Later, this film basically follows 28 years after the pandemic that basically destroyed half of Europe with the rage virus. And we're introduced with a couple new characters. One is Isla, who is played by Jodie Comer, and she's a woman who is suffering from a mysterious illness that isn't fully explained until halfway through the film. You also have Jamie and Spike, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson and Alfie Williams. They're father and son. Isla is Jamie's wife, and basically they're all hanging out and staying in this remote island in Scotland. And once they go out of, the island where, infected people are roaming around the mountains and forests, that's where the film starts to close in on itself. You have Spike, who has turned 12, and there's a ritual where basically once you turn a teenager, you have to set off onto the wilderness in order to get your first kill. And Jamie and Spike do this by going out of the island and to the forest to catch their first kill, or Spike's first kill. Jamie's way older than him. That's where the film starts to close in on itself, and then on top of that, Spike learns a lot about how the world works, especially now since the infected have evolved prior to the last two films where, you see the beginnings of the infected. Now you see them basically running around naked, and you have the infected who have also transformed into bigger infected people. And this is where I think the film starts to kind of go gonzo crazy as far as using the iPhone cinematography technology. Danny Boyle, his first forte into this world started out with 28 Days Later, and that was shot on DV camcorders. With this, you have a film that is shot on iPhone Pro Max. I'm actually shooting this review on an iPhone Pro Max, so I understand a lot of the kind of downfalls of the technology. You can see from watching the film, there's some ghosting with the little cinematography and the color grading, but also at the same time, the film is very experimental and plays around with frenetic editing. There's a lot of moments where it splices between archival footage of war from I think World War II to a scene from I think Othello and Robin Hood, the original Robin Hood film from the 60s. And then that plays around with the overall vibe of the film, which is basically about war, or the terror of war, and how basically the infected are, the enemies. They're the ones that you're supposed to kill. But also at the same time, there's massive effects of the aftermath of this pandemic, this virus that basically wiped out half of humanity. And this is where the film also gets super dream crazy, where basically Spike, his father, Jamie, is kind of at a point where he's starting to become more away from Spike's intentions, and Jamie is kind of messing around with other women while his wife is suffering with this mysterious illness. And that causes Spike to kind of flee the area with his mom to find a doctor who was played by Ralph Fiennes. And I think this is where, again, the film starts to kind of shift from, the typical apocalyptic survival story to cathartic coming of age story about a kid who is just seeing death everywhere, and he has to figure out how to attain his emotions. And the doctor, played by Ralph Fiennes, Ian Kelson, once they come together, the film starts to kind of play a lot more with that thematic in mind. But I really enjoyed this. The first 2/3 of this film is very gonzo. It's crazy. It is far experimental and different from, your typical apocalyptic survival film. And on top of that, I really enjoyed the performances in this film. Alfie Williams, I've never seen this kid before, but his performance in this really holds the entire film, because in some moments he's very serious about what he's trying to do and how he's trying to survive. And there's moments where he can't really kill, his first infected in the beginning, but then, as he learns more about the land and how it operates, that's where he kind of gains a lot of confidence. Aaron Taylor Johnson is really good in this, and he only appears in the first 40 minutes of his film, where he's playing the dad. He's trying to help Spike out, and there's moments where you think, oh, he's gonna lash out at his kid because he's not really being a man, as I should say, but he's actually way more in tune and just patient with the child compared to other men who would just be ah, fuck you, you can't kill infected, you're weak. But no, it's actually the other way around, and it plays a lot with masculinity, and that's basically most of what the 28 series is. It's basically the idea of these humans trying to survive while also dealing with emotions and just masculinity and femininity in this landscape. And then Jodie Comer, as always, she's always great. She's always going to give a good performance. I haven't seen anything terrible from her, but here she's really great. And Ralph Fiennes also as well. There's also another character, a Swedish character, who appears midway through this film, played by Edvin Writing. I think he was on The Young Royals on Netflix. I have never seen that show before, but he shows up in this and he does his thing. He's also kind of the comedic relief of the film, where basically Spike and Jimmy, they kind of bond a little bit, and Jimmy has this cell phone, this iPhone, and Spike doesn't know what technology is, and they're just kind of riffing off on what Spike hasn't seen before in his life, and it's really, really funny. And there's just also moments of just catharsis going back to that, because once Spike kind of understands the feeling of the land and just how survival works, I think that's where he starts to really realize himself. And there's a really cathartic moment near the third of this film that kind of teared me up a little bit. And there's also a really cool sequence when Spike and Jamie are running away from this big giant big dick down infected guy. They're getting chased in the water, and it's this really dreamy, psychedelic cinematography-esque kind of feeling that's happening while they're running away from this big guy. And yeah, it was really interesting how this film is shot. It's way different than compared to other films that you would see typically. But the only problem that I have is this film basically has a jarring ending, where the last 10 minutes of this film has a kind of weird Power Rangers moment where something happens and that causes Spike to kind of shift away from the typical normal setting that he's in. I won't spoil what it is, but it was completely jarring, and it sets up to the next film that's coming out, I think in January. And that film is shot by Nina DaCosta, who did Candyman, the remake. And yeah, it was a little bit jarring how the film ended, but it's basically a setup for the next film, and it'll probably lead on to, what happens from the ending of this film to the new film that's coming out next year. But overall, I really dug this. This probably will work for people who really want something different from compared to their typical survival apocalyptic films. But I think here, a lot of the stuff that happens here totally works. Some of it doesn't. There's some motivations that are a little bit questioning me personally, but I think it'll probably be addressed in the next film. But yeah, overall, pretty good film. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. As far as, awards for this film, if I have to kind of predict, I think the sound design and the cinematography is duly noted, because the sounds of the infected chewing on humans is really, really immersive. And the cinematography in this is also really great, going back to it, because it's completely shot in this kind of 2 f/35 aspect ratio and shot with iPhones and with lenses for the iPhones. And also the music is really, really good. The music's by Young Fathers, which is like rap R&B group that I actually really love. They're one of my favorite like bands. So it was really like surprising to see them do like the score for this film. And yeah, I would predict it for sound design and cinematography and makeup, if I'm being honest. But overall, yeah, this was really solid. I can't wait for the next one. I'm excited, and you should be checking out this film this weekend. But yeah, I give this a 4 out of 5. Take care, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be reviewing more films. So yeah, thank you guys. Peace out.